Inside these walls of San Quentin Penitentiary are perhaps three of the most well-known prisoners in recent history. They're called the Soledad Brothers. And not too far from here, in another penal institution, is Professor Angela Davis, who has also been in the public eye. Of the 23,900 prisoners in California's 12 state prisons, 30% of them are black. Nationally, there are about 400,000 inmates, and close to 1/3 are non-white. In an effort to shed some light on how black people are affected by the correctional and judicial institutions, Black Journal spoke to those involved with Angela Davis and the Soledad Brothers, inmates in San Quentin and Soledad prisons, and lawyers, families, and friends of some of those who consider themselves political prisoners.
Substantiation for what goes on in a prison is very difficult. This is not a vindication of what has taken place, and this is not a vindication of crime per se. It is an attempt to find out what the penal institution and the correctional systems as an institution are doing to rehabilitate those that society has judged to be wrong.
Angela Davis, labeled by the press a black militant female communist, worked actively to free the Soledad Brothers and what she felt were other black political prisoners. She was dismissed from her teaching position at UCLA for political activity, which the university labeled subversive. She gained international attention in October 1970 during an intensive 2-month nationwide FBI hunt. She was arrested and charged with murder, kidnapping, and allegedly conspiring with 17-year-old Jonathan Jackson to purchase guns for use in a California courthouse shootout in which Jackson and 3 others were killed. The courts refused bail amid protests from thousands who rallied to her defense, shouting of her innocence and chanting, "Free Angela."
The signs of a conspiracy are cropping up. A conspiracy whose present goal appears to be the destruction of the very possibility of education in the state. Now, I think it's significant, as I said before, that the regents chose me as a target of their attack. I think it's symbolic, because black members of the Communist Party are far, far from being the only black people who are beginning to see that this society must be thoroughly transformed if we're going to solve these basic problems. All over the country, black people, Chicanos, white people, everybody, I think, is waking up to this. I think we have to establish some priorities. We have to ask ourselves whether we're going to make an effort now towards individual fulfillment or whether we're going to wage a fight for a more humane society. Whether we're going to create a strong defensive against what may very well become an era of fascism.
Brother Singleton, what does Angela Davis mean to you? I think she means to me what, well, the way I feel about Angela right now is the way I think all black people have felt throughout history when they've seen their sisters and mothers being taken off and raped. But with her case, I feel even worse because I know there's a black man that she's being victimized for things that I should be doing. You know, like everybody knows there's genocide in the jails. It took a small girl like her to stand up and say that it's wrong and something needs to be done about it. And because she has said something, now they're trying to trump up charges and put her behind, well, just wipe her out, really, is what it is.
Do you think Angela was dangerous enough to be considered one of the 10 most wanted people in the country?
No, I think that's a distortion. Same kind of distortion that emerged around the case around here, where they said, she was just a crazy radical who was on campus and who would come to, indoctrinate students with, all kinds of other beliefs about politics and about society.
What was she like to work with?
Really great. She's a really great teacher. Anyone you talk to will really tell you that. Really a lot of enthusiasm for the kind of things that she studied and for, making sure that people actually learned things and got a chance to really think creatively and critically about the kind of things that they were dealing with.
It's been said that Angela is a political prisoner. What is a political prisoner?
Well, to my understanding, there are two kinds of political prisoners. There are those political prisoners who are protesters, whose politics and activities are anti what the American capitalist system thinks is apropos. And then there's other kinds of political prisoners, which are, to me, black brothers and sisters who were just caught up in not being able to make a living in American society, so that you have a situation. You have Angela Davis and you have Michelle McGee, her co-defendant in this case. Both of them are political prisoners.
What they're doing to her is an exaggerated form of what happens every day to black people in this country. And they're saying to those communities through her that, people have to straighten up and fly right and be good niggas, and that they cannot, challenge the system. And that's what Angela Davis is doing.
Now, the question of who is going to be the next in this long list of political prisoners is really the important one. All we can do now is just either band together and do something about it or just forget about Angela and start thinking about what we're going to do about the next leader that stands up.
What can we do?
I think the first thing we have to do is certainly make sure that we do have some unity in the black community so that when a sister like that stands up, that they don't wipe her out as one person, that they have to wipe out more than one person.
Why did she run?
Yeah, that's
and also, why did she stay in the country?
right. Well, see, I think Angela's answered that by saying that to have given herself up at the time that the warrant was issued for her would have been tantamount to putting her head on the executioner's block. And I think what she means by that is that there was such a hysteria in this country, I mean in the whole country, but especially in California, that as soon as the events in San Rafael took place, the next thing you hear, Angela Davis buys guns, Angela Davis implicated in the San Rafael incident, and the massive headlines day after day after day. And so that her escape had to be planned day to day. And it wasn't well planned because there were no plans beforehand. And so everything that she did was done day to day. I mean, the press that was used against her, I mean, her picture was on the cover of every magazine, wanted posters. I mean, and like putting her on the 10 most wanted list was like a license for any crazed racist to shoot her on sight. And I'm sure that they would have accepted that had that happened. There would have been no outcry if somebody had shot her, and there just was no way for her to escape.
Angela is indeed a symbol. When the President of the United States goes on nationwide television before, 22 million people, and after signing the crime control bill and handing it to Hoover and to Mitchell and says, let this serve as a warning to Angela Davis and all other terrorists. When the President of the United States, virtually convicts somebody with one sentence before they're even tried, I think you begin to understand what she means. She threatens their whole way of life, their whole profit
motive, their determination to continue the war in Vietnam and to continue killing black people.
Some people represent the struggle physically, and others represent it vocally. Angela Davis is a spokeswoman for the struggle. Therefore, whatever she does is more emphasized than what the average person would do. And Angela Davis is not only a person, again, she's a principle and an image that black people use and emulate and can hold up in some esteem as an example of black womanhood.
Well, do you agree that the image that Angela Davis projects should be esteemed by other black women?
The image that she projects as a revolutionary in the sense of wanting to perpetuate and promote change, I think is good. The only thing that I disagree with is that the use of a foreign ideology. And when I say foreign ideology, what I'm talking about is a commitment to communism.
Communism and people like myself or Angela who joined the Communist Party, I think basically what we're doing is we're saying that the system is rotten at its core, that the system itself has to be changed, that we, while we fight for the immediate needs of the people constantly and continually, better housing, the end of police brutality, stopping the depression level of unemployment in the black community, that while we continue to do those kinds of things, we do know, in fact, that the system itself creates those conditions, and that the changing of those conditions basically means establishing a socialist society. And that's what I think we're talking about when we say we are communists. And we're also saying that we think we need a party that is partisan to stopping those conditions, that a party that organizes other people in order to change the society.
You can't talk about a political struggle until you have first given people a value system from which to operate. So we're saying that the first struggle is a struggle to win the minds of the people. And to win the minds of the people, that has to be done through a value system, through a total lifestyle, a total ideology that has to be developed by that people in order to liberate themselves. Talking about that left-wing takeover, or white people co-opting our leaders or co-opting our images, I think the case of Bobby Seale is an exemplary one, in that in the beginning there was the Chicago 8, and all of a sudden it became the Chicago 7. And it just so happened that the Chicago 7 were all white boys. And, shall we say, they gained their fame at the expense of Bobby Seale. Matter of fact, I saw a book just the other day by Abby Hoffman, and the title of the book said, Chicago 8. Now, the 8 was crossed out, and over top of the 8, they had 7, and a picture of Bobby Seale gagged and bound in the courtroom. Now, to me, that's like exactly what it's all about. It's all about co-opting your people, co-opting your leaders when you do not have an ideology that you develop and that fits your particular situation. So when people talk about communism, like I said before, that's just another ism that was created and written by white boys who were neither concerned about nor understood the problems of black people. Beyond everything, she's still my sister, and I want her to survive.
When dealing with Angela, we must take under consideration another brother here that needs the help of the community awful bad, and that's Rachel McGee. It seems like all of the attention has been focused just on Angela, which she's a beautiful sister, and she has attorneys from all corners of the world, But I think it's time that the community really look at a true revolutionary and someone that was trying to do something for black people as a whole, and not only for black people, but for other oppressed people of the world, to show them what the system is made of. And I think that the community should come to his aid.
Also, what we are forgetting about is Bobby Seale. Bobby Seale is fighting for his life back on the East Coast. Nobody even mentioned him no more. They forgot about him. The brothers in prison, period. We all held down, you understand? In other words, we're all political prisoners.
I feel that as a lawyer, my obligation is to use my talents in my people's struggle. We're now emphasizing Angela Davis because she is in the public eye. She's getting a lot of attention through media, and because of the drama connected with the events. You have a legal right to buy guns. The only requirement is that you comply with the applicable state and federal laws. She complied with those laws. There's no law against supporting the Soledad Brothers. There's no law against petitioning, picketing, and speaking about the injustices to all black political prisoners throughout the United States. As a matter of fact, you have a constitutional right to do that. I mean, there's no reason why every man who goes to court couldn't have a lawyer of his choice, a lawyer who's competent. There's no reason why a man has to remain in jail because he's unable to post bond. There's no reason why a man should go to trial in a court of law when he has not had the benefit of an investigation by trained investigators, or he hasn't had access to scientific and expert advice in his defense. But it's a conscious political decision not for people not to have that. And this is more common. It's more regular, more routine when it comes to black people. Therefore, all black people, wherever they are, whatever their crimes, even crimes against other blacks, they are political prisoners. Because the political system has dealt with them differently than it has dealt with whites. Whites get the benefit of every law, every loophole. Whites get the benefit of being judged by their peers, by other white people. Blacks don't get that benefit of any such jury trial. Jury trial is almost a cinch to result in the conviction of a black person. Judges send people to prison. They've never been to prison in their life. Send a man to prison for 20 years and have no idea what a prison looks like, and perhaps don't care. And judges who are supposed to be the guardians of the law are out golfing, work 2 days a week, sometimes work 2 or 3 hours a day, and things of that sort. We could get rid of all that and have courts that actually take place in the community. For example, in a large housing project in Chicago. Chicago is a good example because it looks as though they must have 11 miles of projects in Chicago. Why should they have to go downtown to the Cook County Courthouse for justice? Why can't the people in the housing project have their own court and decide who should be fined for assault and battery, who should be fined for stealing radio or television, or who should be fined, or who should be punished, and what the punishment should be for urinating in the hallways and things that people do? I mean, why should this judicial power that rightly belongs to the people be administered solely from one location downtown in the Cook County Courthouse or in some precinct courthouse? I mean, why can't the people themselves administer this power?
For many blacks, it's an endless cycle. A judicial system which is very often unjust. A prison system which many times does not rehabilitate. And then release into the outside world where the same conditions that sent them to prison await them. In some areas of this country, as many as 75% of former prisoners end up in prison again. The 7-Step Foundation, an organization founded by ex-convicts to help keep themselves and other ex-convicts out of jail, also brings attention to conditions inside prison.
There are quite a number of problems. I'd say the main problem would be discrimination and racism, and the fact that there are no real rehabilitational type factors involved inside the penal institutions. In other words, you go to eat at a certain time, they provide you with clean laundry, you're told to get up, stand up, line up, shut up, and lock up. This is social regimentation. Say, take a person out of society and you ship them off 20 or 30 miles away from where they're accustomed to living, and they're involved in this social regimentation. Then you release them with the hope that they've been rehabilitated and they can come out and become useful and decent citizens of our community, which is an impossibility. Prison guards have been known to make homosexuals out of young men. They'll put them in a cell with a known homosexual maker, and the young man has to fight for himself, and many times he might end up killing the person, or he might be killed himself. This is the type of tyranny and intimidation that goes on inside prison.
Ken, what prison were you in?
I was in San Quentin, Soledad, and Chino. You hear that San Quentin is the hellhole, so to speak, of the California correctional system, but basically and actually it isn't. Soledad is. It's a place that everything is inside. It's all built off of a long hall, and the hall is so long that You stand at one end and you can't even see the other end, and they have wings off of it. And there's 3,000 men there, and they don't have to go outside for anything, and they're all there on each other's nerves.
Well, the Soledad Brothers case in the prison itself probably can be said to have started on January 13th, 1970. At that time, for the first time in months, they decided that they would put both black and white prisoners together in a small exercise yard. This had not occurred for many, many, many months. And they turned them out after skin searching each of these men to make absolutely certain they had no weapons of any kind, one at a time, one white, one black, one white, one black, into a small exercise yard. Prior to that time, they had posted on the wall the guard in the prison who was the most expert marksman. He had a high-powered rifle. And the very thing that anyone could have anticipated did happen. Some kind of a scuffle broke out. He fired 4 times. At the end, one white had been nicked with a bullet. 3 black men were dead. The district attorney very shortly thereafter announced that he was sure a grand jury would find it was justifiable homicide, and sure enough, it took exactly 3 days for a jury to come out with that kind of a conclusion. That news of the grand jury decision that it was justifiable homicide and no action would be taken against the guard came out over the radio and television and into the prison. And approximately 30 minutes later, this guard was found dead, for which the Soledad brothers have been accused of murder. Now, the interesting thing is that the prison immediately tabbed it a retaliatory act and said that it was in retaliation for the murder of the 3 blacks. Now, following that, several months later, in July, yet another guard was killed, and now there are 7 more blacks that have been charged, and they've been charged with killing this guard. Again, the prison has tabbed this a retaliatory act.
How are the Soledad brothers political prisoners?
They have been very active in the liberation struggle of black people. They believe black people to be among other people oppressed in this country and have actively worked towards their liberation. So, like George Jackson, one of the Soledad 3 brothers, each time he goes up before the parole board, he is denied for no reason. But this has been because of his political activity, which he has continued inside the prison.
George Jackson is an extremely political human being. He's a revolutionary in the finest and greatest tradition of the word. He is a man who came into the prison when he was 18 over a very minor kind of an alleged crime where there was no violence of any kind. His parents hired a lawyer who told him to plead guilty after talking with him about 10 minutes, said he would get him a light sentence. George wound up in the state penitentiary rather than in county jail with a, in fact, light sentence. He's been there 10 years. The other 2 men are 2 men who have not been in prison as long. They're fine men. Fleta Drumgo was due to go before a parole board in May, and with every expectation that he would have a parole date set and he would be released. John Clutchette actually had a parole date set, and he was to be released in April. this incident having started January of 1970. These three men are very solid, they're very solidly together, and they're all totally innocent.
Well, it's impossible for them to have a fair trial. Like, some of the things that have happened so far indicates this. Like when we go into court, the judge who presided over their last hearings, I mean, like in his opening remarks to the group of people who were in the courtroom in support of the brothers, was that he wanted to remind us that we were in a court of law and not at some pool hall or a barbecue table. This was directed to the black people who were in the courtroom, members of their family and friends.
How strong is the state's case against them?
Well, the state in this situation has allegedly some 12 or 13, 14 witnesses who supposedly are going to testify that these individuals committed the crime. I can assure you there are going to be a great number of others who are going to testify contrawise, namely that they couldn't have committed the crime because it happened up on the third floor and these men were not up on the third floor. It's going to be a difficult case because there's a determination to see that they are convicted.
What kind of things are being done to see that they're convicted?
Well, one of the problems that we've run into as far as the case itself is concerned is that immediately following the charge being brought against these three men, many of the prisoners that were in the wing where this alleged crime occurred were moved to other prisons throughout the state of California. This makes it very difficult because we have to travel throughout the state and try to contact these individuals and find out what they do know and what evidence that they can give as far as the case is concerned.
You were at Soledad when the three prisoners were killed in the courtyard. What kind of conditions existed at that time?
Mainly what created that incident was social attitudes, you know, that certain type of correctional officer has that's employed there in Soledad. And they're dealing with angry young men that, well, to give you an example, you cage a lion and you start poking at him with a stick, he eventually is going to growl back at you and try to attack you. And in there you're dealing with human beings. And it was a situation that it was inevitable, that it happened and it's going to happen again too.
Crane 15144, Crane 15144, the lock shows is 1872, the lock up to 1872. Bracket 27295, bracket 27295, Cooper 83 710, Cooper 83 710, Latimer 88 979, Latimer 88 979, Barrier 633 44, Barrier 633 44, Latimer.
What type of things you think are needed within the prison in terms of reform?
Well, I think personally, man, that they should have some type of people from the streets, man, to come in, man, constantly, man, because they subjected you to all type of madness, you know what I mean? To where, like, when I was in the hole, I just got the hole. I did 17 months over there, and there wasn't no toilet, no nothing in nothing in the cells, you know what I mean? There was defecation on the tiers, you know what I mean? And you just stayed over there. You shower once a week. You know what I mean? You ain't got no hot and cold water in your cell, nothing but cold water.
What are you here for, Jack?
I'm here for robbery.
How long have you been here?
I've been in San Quentin 20 months now.
How long are you going to be here?
I think about another 2 years.
What you going to do when you get out?
But I'm going to try to go out and help my people, you know. That's what I'm trying to do now in here.
How do you spend your day here?
I work in the gymnasium, you know. I just sweep, mop, you know, lift weights, recreation things.
You're not taking any trade?
No, well, I was told when I first got up here that I was dangerous and I was militant and they didn't want to let me in any kind of trade. So I stayed locked down for about 6 months when I first got up here. And then they finally let me get a job in the gym, but they told me I couldn't get anything else. They told me the bakery had a year waiting list. So I went to board, and board, you know, they're going to let me get a transfer now. But it's cold up here, bro. You know, I mean, you get no press all kind of ways. Every step we try to make to advance ourselves is contrary to them. We are racist, you know, we revolutionaries because of what we believe. You know, I mean, what they're trying to do is stomp out our beliefs. You know, they want us to advance no kind of way.
What kind of changes you want to see inside the prison?
I want to see the whole thing change. I mean, the whole administration. I think they should get people who are qualified to work here. I mean, people with college educations who can understand people. More brothers. I mean, it's a cutback. We just had a safety meeting. It's a cutback
on our black counselors now, who's supposed to come in and counsel us, you know. It's cut back on our legal materials, cut back on everything.
What about you, brother?
Well, see, it's all type of forms of intimidation that they use against people here to repress their ideas and thoughts, just for thinking. You know, if you think in a positive manner, it's a danger to the security of this institution, which they're going to take some type of action behind you for this alone. Today, they just shook the Brothers' house down for black material, black literature, dealing with just plain articles, you know. We're not allowed to voice our opinions. I was locked in the hole for a poem I wrote. You know, I was denied a year at the board for a poem I wrote. This is all because of the way I think, because of my ideas, you know, and they're frightened that the black man here in the jail will get together and try to do something to change his condition.
You think you have any problems because you gave this interview?
Well, brother, I really don't know. Like I said, I always expect the worst and hope for the best. Me, because like I said, I was locked down for a poem I wrote, you know. So behind this interview, it's not no telling what might happen.
Letters from prisoners and pressures from the Soledad Brothers Defense Committee led to an investigation by a caucus of black California legislators on conditions inside Soledad Prison. Chairman of the Black Caucus is State Senator Mervyn Dimely.
We found that there was a great deal of racism at Soledad, that there was a great deal of discrimination against blacks, and that some of the white guards had deliberately perpetuated this system of racial inequality at the prison system. That the men had complained that urine was put in their food, and in some instances glass, and that they had been subject to a great deal of racial slurs and inhuman treatment. And this was perpetuated by developing a system of white class status, where you find most of the whites get in the better jobs and blacks get in very menial jobs. This, in addition to that, we actually heard in this, you know, blacks, the whites calling the blacks number of names in our presence there, hollering all through the security section of the prison. The guards are mostly men who come back from the service, men who served in the military police or the special police forces. So there are a number of ex-servicemen, many of whom come from southern states. These guards are inadequately trained. They are paid very, very low salaries. See, a prisoner has no way now of filing a complaint. There is no way of processing a grievance. And so if he is deliberately discriminated against, and we have evidence of this, there's no way he can redress his grievances. A large measure, the things for which he is being trained have become obsolete in the community when he comes out. Many of them spend a great deal of time making license plates for automobiles. But when they come out in the outer world, there are no license plates to be made, because all the license plates are made in the prison. Some of them become cabinet makers, but we don't have cabinet makers in the traditional sense anymore. Everything is being cut by panels in the factory and glued on or stapled on. So they are not adequately trained to meet the challenges of an automated society.
What kind of attempts have the state made to correct some of the problems in the prisons, men and women's prisons?
I can't really say that they've made any attempts to correct some of the problems, because I don't think they know the answers, or they're not ready to deal with most of the problems. But they have made several attempts. There's been quite a few pilot programs and new and innovative programs, most of which are ineffective because they're not put into effect to really work. They're put there to pacify society and to pacify the inmates. There's no real effective way to change a system without first tearing it down. I'd like to make that quite clear. The only thing that you could possibly do would be to make some modifications to what already exists. And from what I see that already exists is something I term as institutional racism. And you can't change that, because you would have to fire all the administrators, which most of them are old prison guards, ex-narcotic officers, ex-police officers, and ex-people who have worked in law enforcement field. The institutions themselves, they need to have a social adjustment. In other words, there needs to be more academic opportunities made available to inmates, more cultural opportunities made available. The prisons themselves, walls are built for two purposes. One, to keep people who are inside, inside, and keep those who are outside, outside.
How long you been here?
I've been in San Quentin for about 5 years.
How long you gonna be here?
I don't know.
What you in for?
Armed robbery.
What type of changes would you like to see inside the prison?
I'd like to see it, this prison system here totally eradicated. This thing they have going here as a prison is a concentration camp, man. That's all I see it as. They got blacks coming in here for petties with a pry, for spitting on the sidewalk. I mean, half the brothers in here, man, you know, are in here because they're poor. This is the only reason that they're in the penitentiary. If they had some money, were able to acquire legal aid or something, they wouldn't be in the pen in the first place, you know. Like myself, half of us got railroaded here, didn't know what we was doing, made little old funny deals with the DAs and everything, and ended up in the pen, you know. Myself, as a prison system, this is a total failure. I haven't seen, you know, in my 5 years here, I haven't seen anyone go to the street and continue to be a success. You either hear about him dying, or hear about he's strung out on dope, or either you see him coming back through the gates not too long afterwards. He's released from here. Political prisoner, as far as any black man who is aware of himself and aware of the things that's going down out there in the streets today is a political prisoner, you know, because this is what they're down on the people at the board for. Now, when you go to the board, they're not asking you where's the clean time, how much clean time you have, how much time you have with write-up. They're asking you, what do you think about the Black Panther Party? What do you think about Huey Newton, the Adult Authority Board, the Parole Board? What you think about the Huey Newton? What do you think about the Black Panthers, you know what I mean? Why are you a Muslim? Why do you have this outlook? Do you advocate killing white people? And all this stuff like this here, you know. All the, right. All the questions they ask you have a political tinge and hue to them, you know. This is all. Everybody here who's aware of itself it's a farce, man, you know. All this. That's all I see, man, is oppression, you know. That's all I see, another form of genocide. That's all I see.
How does the California Adult Authority relate to all this? I mean, what is it?
The California Adult, pardon me. The California Adult Authority is, known by another name as the Parole Board. When a person comes through the Superior Court in a given county and he's sent to state prison, then the Adult Authority has the final say as to how long that person is going to remain in prison or whether he's going to get a parole. Even though an inmate might have a clean conduct record, even though he might not get into any scrapes, even though he might go along with the program, but if he shows any kind of a attitude that the adult authority considers as uppity, then the adult authority says parole denied, and then this just builds up resentment because the man knows he's done nothing wrong. He's done no overt act. Then you have this resentment spread throughout the prison.
Mrs. Jackson, how long has your son been in prison?
Since 1961.
And how did that all start?
He was with a fellow who arrived at a service station in Los Angeles. They were in his old car together, and according to a witness, a young man who worked at the filling station, he said that this man came in with a gun and robbed him, that he didn't see my son at all. This witness was at the courthouse the morning that they had the trial, the so-called trial, the hearing, the morning that the judge sent him to state prison with an indeterminate sentence. You know, that means that he can go there and stay 12 years before they decide how long they want to sentence him to stay. In the meantime, he's waiting there for the board to decide the number of years they want him to stay in prison. I know once I was lucky enough to talk to a counselor at San Quentin who happened to be a black man. And he told me that my son spoke out too much in his own defense. And if he would learn to keep quiet more and just be humble when he went before the board, take everything they accused him of and not say anything back, that he would be better off. But I don't see how a person can be better off making a dog of themselves or bowing down to anybody. And I think that I didn't raise them in the way where you could accuse them of something, and if they were guilty or not, they just take it. I think every man should have the right to stand up and defend himself. I don't think that should be a privilege only reserved for white people. I think black people should have it too. I have talked to prisoners who've come from San Quentin and Soledad and Tracy, who said that my son taught them how to read. And so I said, well, maybe if he has been in prison for 10 years and he's labeled an animal, he has done some good in this world. And that's the only consolation I can have right now, that he has tried to help his fellow man, even at the risk and the cost of his own life, and staying in prison so long.
The youngest and only other son in the Jackson family was Jonathan, an extremely political youth. Last August, Jonathan allegedly initiated an attempt to free 2 convicts on trial in a San Rafael courtroom. The judge, district attorney, and 3 jurors were taken hostage in a waiting van. As the truck pulled out of the parking lot, a force of police, prison guards, and deputies surrounded it. There was shooting. 4 persons lay dead. The judge, 2 convicts, and 17-year-old Jonathan Jackson.
Jonathan, well, he was at the school age. You know how it is when you're in school. You're taught a lot of things, but when you see that things aren't like you think they are, then you react. Especially a young person growing up in this day and age, they react violently, and especially when something is happening to maybe a person in your family, awful, dreadful injustice is happening to someone in your family that you love and respect very dearly.
Why do you think it happened?
Why? Because George was accused of this murder in January, and we had gone to court several times. We knew that he wasn't going to get any justice in the court. It was just obvious the way they were treated. They were shackled. They were in prison clothes. Their hair wasn't combed. Their hands were chained. Their feet were chained. They were chained through their crotch, around their waist, and they had steel leg guards.
When my son Jonathan was murdered over in San Marin, Marin County, or wherever it is, I took him to Illinois to bury him. Before I could get him to the cemetery, the FBI had opened the casket and disarranged his body to the extent where it couldn't be viewed by his aunts and uncles and his cousins who came to see him, to show their respect for him.
Why did they do that?
I don't know why they did it, unless they were looking for Angela Davis in the casket. And that's another thing I resent about this whole thing. I resent that this country thinks so little of its black male citizens that they have to say that a woman tells a man what to do. I believe my son was a man. He was 17, and I think he was a better man than a lot of people who live to be 90. I knew my son better than anybody. And I know that he wouldn't let anybody tell him what to do unless he wanted to do it himself. And I know he wouldn't let any woman tell him what to do. That I know. And I'm tired of reading the accounts of what he was thinking and how he wanted to commit suicide and all these things. I'm tired of reading about it. I'm tired of people telling what he was when people didn't even know him. How do they know what he was? He was a gentle person. He was always gentle and kind. And he liked people. And he never felt that people didn't like him. That was the sad part. He always felt that people liked him, and he knew when he ran into anybody who didn't, it really upset him. And he loved his family, and it always upset him because that George wasn't around.
For 10 years of his life, since he was 6, he hadn't
the only
seen
view
George
that he
outside.
saw of his brother was behind bars or in some waiting room with crowds of other people around. And to have to grow up like that, a male child have to grow up like that, it's terrible.
There's a lot black people can do. For one thing, black people can stop being ashamed of prison, or people that they have in prison, or relatives that they have in prison, or even knowing that there is someone in prison. I don't feel that there is the need for shame any longer. There never was in the first place. But this is a level of awareness that I am at now.
None of us are free. No black person in this country is free. We're still in prison. We're in economic prisons. We're in educational prisons. We're in environmental prisons. I mean, in the housing that we're forced to live in. You know, we cannot forget the brothers who are in prisons. We cannot forget those who are still caught up in rat-infested ghettos. We have to use all our resources that we can, financial, influential, just showing our concern, because this country thinks of us as being black first, before it thinks of us as being human beings, before it thinks of us as being Americans.
Self-Advancement Through Education, or SATE, is an organization formed by brothers in San Quentin who willingly spoke of conditions inside that institution, in spite of fears of reprisals.
Dealing with some of the oppressive methods of discriminatory and racist practices that is practiced here, dealing with self-advancement through education, we come together primarily in order to educate our brothers into a revolutionary culture vein. It's because this educational system, if we did want it to participate, they won't let us participate because it's discriminatory and it's racist. And then we can go on into many details and explain this to you, which
I like that.
One of the specific problems we're concerned with at the moment in here, which is I think most black organizations are concerned with on the streets, is that of trying to bring about a form of operational unity among all black people. In other words, a form of a united front.
We're trying to get rid of the tokenism that is involved here. We're trying to be more relevant and stop trying to fool ourselves into thinking we can go back out into society and become a part of something that is crumbling.
We want the support of all the black businessmen out there, of the lawyers, of anyone who's in a position of expertise to come in here and check things out. Brothers are getting arbitrarily harassed on the yard every day. They're taken to the holes, you understand? Our haircuts, you understand me? They complain about our hair, you know, things of this nature. We can't have literature. We can't support our brothers. We can't say black power right on, you know. We can't relate to our own lifestyles within the penitentiary. We have to relate to some automatic prison robot. You see?
We can't even buy black products from the canteen. We got to sit back and suffer with VO5 and suntan lotion. Brothers, we don't need no suntan lotion. What we need is black products.
They took brothers to the hole for saluting George Jackson. You see? Took him to the hole, man, for saluting the brother when he come out on the yard to go for a visit. And these are the things that's happening to us, man. And our people out there, man, they don't even relate to this, man. You know?
For instance, like when a man sits back and tells you that you cannot have a natural comb or that you cannot grow your hair, the first thing he's telling you is that you don't even exist to him. You see what I mean? So if you don't even exist, and you ask yourself the question, what are you doing here in the pen? So what are our people doing to alleviate this whole situation, period? Like a lot of people out there are in positions to, if not do something, at least investigate this matter and make these things known and carry these things throughout the community so that people will understand that people in here have relegated themselves past the so-called criminal point, shall we call it. In other words, like the whole question of criminality, like in the brother Rochelle McGee's case. Now this brother was given life for a so-called $10 robbery and a kidnap. This brother's been down 7 years. You see what I'm talking about? Does $10 relegate a man to be in a position to do 7 years in the penitentiary? That is genocide in itself.
You may rest assured this concrete and steel and uncooked beans. Can you dig what I'm talking about? This prison right here, this pit of hell, is not going to never kill self-advancement through education, every black man throughout this nation's idea of taking care of real righteous business. Because we know, all of us brothers are fully aware that our sisters and brothers in the north and south and east and west are suffering from human dignity and self-respect. And we're definitely going to take care of that.
We're prepared to, I think, concluding the most important thing black people can do for us is to develop a massive political and legal movement to bring this system around.
These are the kind of things that bring about the frustration. Satan is here for a change, either to overthrow the prison system or to cause more blood to flow within the prison. Because one thing, we're not going to tolerate it any longer. 71, there will be a change.
For anyone, confinement in prison is an endless nightmare. For black people, it's that and more. They're called correctional institutions. Yet, as several inmates pointed out, it's the conditions inside prisons which need the most correction. The complaints of brothers in Soledad and San Quentin can be heard in penitentiaries all over America and reflects the feelings of many black people that such injustice is deeply embedded in this country and a result of institutionalized racism. Those familiar with prison conditions say change will come when black people and others concerned lend support to the brothers in every prison and make sure that our representatives also represent these forgotten black men. Finally, we must answer the imprisoned sisters and brothers who ask, where is justice?
Now, you know, the question